Value Impulses, the podcast for potential development. By and with Uli Vogel. A very warm welcome to today's episode of our podcast, Value Impulses. What's it about today? Online assessments. How automation and digitalization have changed the gold standard of personnel selection. This episode is also in preparation for our next one, where I'll be speaking with Christoph Meyer, who's a real specialist in online assessments and has been working with us for a very, very long time. So, today is going to be all about online assessments, right? And yes, the assessment is something that's the method of choice and has actually been taking place increasingly digitally for many years now. And of course, the pool of methods has become very large by now. I would say that the market is extremely fragmented. Many providers are active here with corresponding psychometric testing procedures. But assessment doesn't just mean testing procedures. Other aspects are also relevant, which I'll get to in a moment. So, in this episode, I want to clear things up a bit regarding these online assessments, the different paths available, and actually bring in some structure. Let me begin. So, where do we start? Assessments are the gold standard of personnel selection. Why did I choose that phrasing? Well, we're actually looking behind the forehead, so basically into the brain, into people's reasoning, but also at the hand, like how people work, right? And for me, the hand is always the symbol of the practical. And we also look behind the heart and gut area, into how the emotions and feelings of people are. And we know that, especially in leadership positions or, let's say, key positions, technical competence is naturally important, which is mainly located in the brain, but the implementation. Meaning, how do I put that power into practice? And how I'm also able to deal with other people so that they actually do it together depends on emotions and, therefore, very strongly on personal values, actually. So, the candidates are thoroughly put through their paces over a period of, well, let's say, 1 to 3 days. Regarding their professional competence and their social behavior. That's basically what is understood by assessment. And both individual and group assessments are possible. I'd like to mention an assessment that almost 30 years ago, I've carried out. I'll mention it here too. For a very, very long time when I was young, my career goal was to become a diplomat, so to enter the senior diplomatic service. And that actually wasn't easy at all. There were 2,000 applicants per year, and then 1,500 were allowed to take the written exam. And I think then about 150 were actually invited to the assessment. Back then, I actually spent 2 days in Bonn. That's how far I got. So I was among those 150 people who were put through their paces over several weeks, so to speak, in 2-day cycles. It was quite exciting, I must say. So, of course, it involved language tests, but also psychological tests and interviews. I didn't do that much in writing, so a psychometric procedure didn't exist back then. But you basically had to present a specific topic before a tribunal of 12 people, I think, who made up the selection committee. You also had to discuss things accordingly in a group. And so they were, I'd say setups that were quite something. And they really impressed me too, I have to be honest. In the end, I wasn't accepted because I was at a rank that was behind those who were accepted that year. And I'm also quite glad that I became an entrepreneur and not a diplomat. But that was the goal back then, and it frustrated me too. But it also showed me, because I got good feedback afterwards, where I was good, where I wasn't so good, right? And in that respect, this assessment was worthwhile. It just wasn't online at all back then. And that's why today we have to see where the differences lie now. So, with the on-site assessment. Of course, mainly general problem-solving tasks, role plays, and tasks that capture social skills are carried out. And online, that's not quite as easy. For that, we naturally have many other possibilities nowadays, which can be applied there. And I would say that more and more is becoming possible online. I myself, through my other consulting activities and also training, have increasingly kept an eye on it online or even hybrid, where you have people in the room but also other people joining in. Yes, what are the contents of online assessments, if we take a little look at the methods? Sure, there are case studies, so that the applicants receive a realistic problem or a challenge in advance, right, which could also occur in their future field of work, and they have to develop solutions for it. Workout. Something like that can be requested in writing, in the sense of, a few slides or a short summary of it, but it can also be requested online, essentially during a conversation. So, as the assessor, you then talk to the assessee, if I may call them that, about what the solution actually was. What's now very much done only online, in the sense that there's also very little direct feedback, are the intelligence tests. So, numerical reasoning tests, which test the understanding of numbers and statistical data, where people have to solve complex numerical problems and draw conclusions from the data quickly and accurately, which is obviously very doable online. Because, you can set time limits there, and then the window closes, and you have to complete it accordingly. But again, with all these things, as long as the participant isn't really sitting in in the assessor's area of control, meaning actually being there at the company, the door is naturally wide open for, cheating to occur. So, you could have someone else do it, or someone could be sitting there with you and just helping out and giving tips. So, the door is wide open there, of course, although my own experience over the last 15 years and even longer is that it rarely happens. Yeah, and you often actually notice if it has happened, that it's not consistent when you talk to the person afterwards. Right, online assessments are important for gathering a lot of data, but ultimately they shouldn't just stand alone, but should also be verified in a conversation with the people. That's at least, my opinion. And I think, from my experience, I don't know the dark figure, of course, is that, the bulk, so really the vast majority of people actually do it themselves and on their own. And we don't just have numerical reasoning tests, but also verbal reasoning tests. So, it's about how well applicants then understand complex texts, can draw conclusions from them, so they have to reason logically from what they're given. So, that's the linguistic part that often takes place there. And often there are also, tests that aim to reflect the abstract ability here. Back then at Mercury Ervil, 30 years ago, we already had things like that. Already had these shape tests, where it was about looking at some graphics and then you had to answer certain questions. So, we always have various things there that are ultimately being tested. The analytical rationale, the imagination, then, quasi-spatial strategic and also the ability to express oneself through language accordingly. And there are also the so-called situational judgment tests, so that the applicants are confronted with realistic scenarios and then have to make decisions. Right, for example, how they deal with dissatisfied customers, how they deal with a difficult negotiation, situation, and so on. And that also shows the social skills, right? Back then, to refer back to Mercury Ervil, where I learned for a long time, my first management consultancy, I was there for 6 years. It was like this: when someone came for an assessment, they were first of all for 2 or 3 hours. They were, so to speak, looked after by the assistants and had to do all these tests on paper, also had to fill out many things to describe the background of their current situation, right down to sentence completions. And only then, so usually in the afternoon, did they go into the interview with the consultant. And the first question I always asked then was, of course, well, to the assistant who looked after him or looked after her, how were they? How was he? How? How did it seem to you? Right, and I quite often got the feedback that, well, you get the feeling, well, he's a bit arrogant, or he treats me a bit condescendingly, or he's super nice and easy to get along with. And those are, of course, things that you later included in the interview. People were perhaps often not even aware that they actually receive feedback from this side as well. And psychometric procedures, so to put it in online terms again, were already important and relevant back then. So at Mercury Ervil 2, we had a very good, in my opinion, psychometric procedure. But people still carried that out in an analog way back then. And it was then entered by the assistant. And of course, it's becoming more and more common that it's now entered fully online from the start. Perhaps as an anecdote at this point, in 2009, I discovered the Hartmann value profile and then digitalized it, making it digitally usable for profiling values. So, if you look at the evaluation template and mask for the Hartmann value profile, it's actually quite something. You really have to be able to calculate. You have to enter it into a large template like that. And then, using specific mathematical operations, extract the results with quite a bit of effort. Today, of course, that's very, very easy, very, very fast. And I'll go into a few personality tests that are well known in the market, so you've heard of them, which are widely used, and which, of course, today are all online, actually finding their application. There, the BIP is a very, very important one, the Bochum Inventory for Job-Related Personality Description, so BIP, as it's often pronounced. Then, of course, there's also the NEO test. PIR, so NEO and PIR, is often or is related to the Big Five model, which is about representing, let's say, 5 bipolar personality traits. That's actually the, I would say, best validated model in personality testing, which, in my opinion, of course, doesn't cover everything. Because, specifically, the current phase of life isn't reflected in it. There are, of course, the performance tests I mentioned before, intelligence structure tests and similar things, Frankfurt Adaptive Concentration Performance tests, and all the things available online. So, a whole battery of options has really opened up for doing that now. People and applicants, of course, have to prepare themselves for getting all sorts of things online. On the other hand, it must also be said, we have a labor shortage, a shortage of skilled workers, even in management positions, so with online assessments, providers have to be careful not to take up too much time, that it doesn't become too voluminous, because applicants actually say, nope, I'm not doing that. And then it has to be well communicated in advance, because the job market situation is such that many, many offers are available. And I have feedback from clients on my end who say, we don't do all these tests before hiring anymore. Instead, we hire. And then do them, too. Find out, how is it actually? And there is a probationary period. So, it's quite interesting how things are shifting here. Because, of course, the market situation on the job market, it's an employee's market here, and it's getting more intense as the baby boomer generation retires. And so on, it's just, people are being courted. And of course, any preliminary assessment is a hurdle. Unless it's communicated well, in the sense that you can get something out of it for yourself and so on. But again, I think the trend is moving towards People saying at first, without much testing, "Hey, we need this person, they're really good." And then we'll see, once we have them on board, if it's really right and where the fine-tuning is needed, and you can do that through online assessments. Very, very effectively as well. So, what are the advantages of online assessments? Sure, there's simply a scientific basis there to look. Behind the forehead, into the hands, into the heart-gut area. It's flexible. Yes, you can evaluate quickly and quite accurately. There's high cost efficiency when you compare it to the assessment centers, where observers and many participants all have to arrive in a coordinated way. You can design it in a very versatile way and, in my opinion, if the methods are good, it's also appropriately sustainable. Yes, and more, the integration of AI, of artificial intelligence, will likely play a role there. What I think is important is that you actually combine online with personal impressions. They might not even need to be that long. A short conversation can also help, but you have so much preliminary information that you can then really dive in and, eliminate evaluation or judgment errors, like likability, halo effects, recency, or first impressions. Because through online methods, a lot is actually already collected beforehand. Again, cheating or manipulation is possible as long as I let people do it at home. But as a rule, in my opinion, it doesn't happen that often. And during the trial period, a discrepancy often arises, so you also find out that something's not right, to put it bluntly. But I'm not the expert. For online assessments, of course, I use profiling values in the online process. And that's why I'm looking forward to the next episode, because I'm talking to Christoph Meyer, who has been leading and founded the company Outvision in Switzerland for a long time, and is, a partner from the very beginning, you could say, of profiling values. And I'll be interviewing him in the next episode, and then we'll also explore these questions. What motivated him, what his path is, and also what his special USP is. So, it stays exciting. I thank you for your valuable time and for listening. And I'm really looking forward to us hearing each other again. In the next episodes. Bye-bye.